Welcome to Whispering Atom, where the gentle mysteries of our inner worlds unfold like whispered secrets, and neuroscience becomes a peaceful companion for your evening journey toward rest. I'm so grateful you've chosen to join me tonight as we explore one of the most remarkable and quietly beautiful functions of your mind. The way your brain gently makes routine experiences fade into invisibility, creating space for new discoveries while allowing familiar patterns to flow through your consciousness like a gentle, unnoticed river. As you settle in wherever you are in this wide world, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it shows on your clock. Are you perhaps in a familiar space where routines have carved comfortable grooves into your daily experience? Maybe you're surrounded by objects and sounds that have become so familiar they've started to fade into the background of your awareness. Or perhaps you're in a new place where everything still catches your attention with fresh clarity. Take a moment, if you'd like, to share with us in the comments below where you are and what time your part of the world is experiencing right now. There's something wonderfully grounding about knowing we're all here together, each of us carried by the same invisible mental processes that shape how we experience the flow of ordinary moments. Now, get comfortable. Let your breathing settle into its natural rhythm. Allow your shoulders to drop just a little, perhaps adjust your position so you can truly relax. Tonight, we're going to explore something that's happening in your mind at this very moment. The gentle, protective way your brain filters your experience of the world, making some things vivid and noticeable while allowing others to fade into the comfortable background of routine. We'll discover how this invisible mental process shapes everything from how you experience your morning coffee to why familiar routes seem to pass by in a dreamlike blur. Imagine for a moment that you could step outside your own mind and observe how your brain processes the countless streams of information that flow through your consciousness every second of every day. You would witness something remarkable. A sophisticated filtering system that operates with such subtlety and efficiency that you're rarely aware of its presence, even though it shapes virtually every aspect of your conscious experience. Right now, as you listen to these words, your brain is making thousands of decisions about what deserves your attention and what can safely be ignored. The feeling of your clothes against your skin, the sound of air moving through the ventilation system, the pressure of your body against the surface you're resting on. All of these sensations are reaching your nervous system, but most of them are being gently filtered out of your conscious awareness to make space for the experience you've chosen to focus on. This filtering process isn't random or arbitrary. It's the result of incredibly sophisticated neural mechanisms that have evolved to help you navigate a world filled with far more information than any conscious mind could possibly process. Your brain has learned, through years of experience, which sensations and experiences require active attention and which can be safely relegated to the background of awareness. The remarkable thing about this process is how it adapts to your life patterns and experiences. When you first moved into your current living space, every sound was noticeable. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of settling wood, the distant sounds of traffic or neighbors. But gradually, over days and weeks, these sounds began to fade from your conscious awareness. They didn't disappear. Your ears still detect them. Your auditory cortex still processes them. But your brain learned to classify them as routine, familiar, and non-threatening, allowing them to slip beneath the threshold of conscious attention. This same process occurs with visual experiences, physical sensations, smells, and even thoughts and emotions. The route you take to work becomes so familiar that you can drive it while thinking about something entirely different, arriving at your destination with little memory of the journey itself. The face of a loved one becomes so familiar that you might not notice small changes that would be immediately apparent to someone meeting them for the first time. Your brain accomplishes this feat through a process called habituation, which is one of the most fundamental forms of learning that exists in nervous systems. Habituation allows your brain to decrease its response to repeated stimuli that prove to be harmless or irrelevant, freeing up precious cognitive resources for new information that might be important for your survival, well-being, or goals. But habituation is just one component of a larger system that makes routine seem invisible. Your brain also employs what neuroscientists call selective attention, the ability to focus conscious awareness on certain aspects of your experience while filtering out others. This system is constantly making decisions about what information should reach your conscious awareness and what can be processed automatically below the threshold of conscious thought. The neural networks responsible for these processes operate primarily in regions of your brain that you're never directly aware of. Deep within the brainstem, structures like the reticular activating system act as gatekeepers, determining which sensory signals deserve to be passed up to higher levels of processing. The thalamus, sitting at the center of your brain like a relay station, filters and directs information to appropriate cortical regions. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function, constantly adjusts these filtering parameters based on your current goals and context. What's particularly fascinating about these systems is how they learn and adapt. Every time you encounter a repeated experience, whether it's the sound of your morning alarm, the feel of your toothbrush, or the sight of your familiar route to work, neural pathways strengthen that associate this experience with the category of routine or familiar. Over time, these strengthened pathways allow your brain to process these experiences more efficiently, using less conscious attention and fewer cognitive resources. This process of making routine invisible serves several important functions. First, it conserves mental energy. Your conscious mind has limited capacity, and by automating the processing of familiar experiences, your brain frees up resources for dealing with novel situations that might require creative problem-solving or careful attention. Second, it reduces mental clutter, preventing your consciousness from being overwhelmed by repetitive information that doesn't require active response. Perhaps most importantly, this system allows you to exist comfortably in a predictable world while remaining alert to changes that might be significant. Your brain becomes exquisitely tuned to notice deviations from routine, the unfamiliar sound in your house at night, the unexpected emotion in a loved one's voice, the subtle change in a familiar environment that might signal something important. The invisible present that your brain creates through these processes is not empty or absent. Rather, it's a carefully curated experience that balances familiarity with novelty, routine with alertness, efficiency with adaptability. You exist in a state of relaxed awareness where familiar patterns flow through your consciousness like a gentle river, while your attention remains available to focus on whatever truly matters in each moment. This process begins operating from the moment you wake up each morning. As consciousness emerges from sleep, your brain immediately begins the work of filtering your experience, deciding what deserves attention and what can fade into the comfortable background of routine. The sound of birds outside your window might capture your attention on the first morning of spring, but by the 10th morning, it becomes part of the invisible soundscape that surrounds your waking moments. The temperature of the air on your skin, the feeling of your feet touching the floor, the sequence of movements involved in your morning routine. All of these experiences undergo this same gentle process of becoming invisible, not because they cease to exist, but because your brain has learned to process them automatically, efficiently, and below the threshold of conscious awareness. Even your thoughts and emotions participate in this process. Worries that once seemed urgent and demanding gradually lose their emotional charge as your brain habituates to them. Familiar thought patterns begin to flow through your mind like background music, present but not requiring active attention. This mental habituation allows you to develop a sense of inner calm and stability, even in the midst of life's ongoing complexities. The social dimensions of routine invisibility are equally fascinating. The faces of people you see regularly gradually require less conscious processing as your brain develops efficient recognition patterns. Conversations with intimate partners can flow with minimal conscious effort as your brain predicts likely responses and fills in familiar patterns. Even your own reflection in the mirror undergoes this process, becoming so familiar that you might not notice gradual changes that would be immediately apparent to someone who hadn't seen you in months. Your brain's ability to make routine invisible also extends to your internal experience of time. Familiar activities seem to pass quickly because they require minimal conscious attention, while novel experiences feel longer and more detailed because they demand active processing. This is why childhood summers seem to last forever. Everything was new and required conscious attention, while adult routines can make weeks or months feel like they've passed in a blur. The emotional quality of routine invisibility is generally one of comfort and ease. When your brain successfully automates familiar experiences, you can exist in a state of relaxed competence, moving through well-known patterns without stress or effort. This automation creates space for spontaneity, creativity, and deep connection with others, as your conscious attention becomes available for whatever is most meaningful in each moment. Understanding how your brain makes routine invisible can help you appreciate the remarkable efficiency of your mental processes while also recognizing opportunities to re-engage with familiar experiences when you choose to do so. The same neural flexibility that allows experiences to fade into routine also allows them to be brought back into conscious awareness through intention and attention. As we prepare to explore the specific mechanisms through which your brain creates these invisible routines, beginning with the very first moments of each day, you can rest in the knowledge that this process represents one of your mind's most protective and nurturing functions. The ability to make routine invisible isn't a limitation or a flaw. It's a sophisticated adaptation that allows you to live comfortably in a complex world while remaining open to new experiences and meaningful connections. In the chapters that follow, we'll trace this process from its earliest manifestations in your morning routine through its most subtle expressions in how you experience time, memory, and consciousness itself. We'll discover how this invisible work of your brain creates the foundation for a life that balances familiar comfort with ongoing growth and discovery. As consciousness gently emerges from the soft depths of sleep, your brain begins one of its most remarkable daily performances, the subtle orchestration of awareness that transforms the chaotic flood of morning sensations into the familiar, comfortable experience of beginning another day. From the very first moment your eyes open, neural processes are already at work, deciding what deserves your attention and what can safely fade into the invisible background of routine. The transition from sleep to wakefulness represents one of the most dramatic shifts in consciousness that occurs in human experience. Yet for most people, it feels effortless and automatic. This seamless transition is actually the result of incredibly sophisticated neural mechanisms that have learned, through countless repetitions, how to guide your awareness through the familiar patterns of your morning routine while filtering out the overwhelming complexity of sensory information that accompanies each new day. Consider the moment when your alarm first sounds, or when natural light begins to penetrate your sleeping space, or when your internal circadian rhythms gently nudge you toward wakefulness. In those first few seconds of emerging consciousness, your brain is processing an enormous amount of information. The quality of light filtering through your windows, the temperature of the air against your skin, the sounds of the world awakening around you, the position of your body, the state of your internal systems, the emotional residue of dreams that may still be fading from memory. But rather than being overwhelmed by this flood of information, your brain immediately begins the work of pattern recognition and selective filtering that allows you to ease into consciousness with a sense of familiarity and control. The sound of your alarm, which might have been startling and attention-grabbing when you first set it weeks or months ago, has gradually been categorized by your neural systems as familiar, expected, and routine. Your brain processes this sound with minimal conscious effort, allowing you to respond appropriately without the alarm demanding the full focus of your attention. The same process occurs with the visual information that greets your opening eyes. The patterns of light and shadow in your bedroom, the arrangement of furniture, the colors and textures of your surroundings. All of these visual elements have been encoded in your neural networks through repeated exposure. Your visual cortex can now process this familiar environment using well-established neural pathways that require minimal conscious attention, freeing your awareness for whatever might be new or different in your surroundings. The physical sensations of waking up undergo this same gentle filtering process. The feeling of your sheets against your skin, the temperature of the air, the position of your body, the gradual emergence of awareness in your muscles and joints. All of these sensations are being processed by your nervous system, but most of them fade into the background of consciousness because your brain has learned to categorize them as routine and non-threatening. This morning filtering process is orchestrated by several interconnected brain systems working in harmony. The reticular activating system, a network of neurons in your brainstem, acts as the primary gatekeeper, determining which sensory signals deserve to be passed up to higher levels of processing. This system has learned, through experience, which morning sensations typically require attention and which can be processed automatically. Your thalamus, the relay station in the center of your brain, receives these filtered signals and directs them to appropriate regions of your cortex for further processing. The thalamus has also adapted to your morning routine, developing efficient pathways for directing familiar information while remaining alert for anything unusual that might require conscious attention. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for executive function and conscious decision-making, is gradually coming online as consciousness fully emerges from sleep. This region doesn't need to direct attention to every aspect of your familiar morning environment, because lower-level brain systems have already categorized most of the incoming information as routine and predictable. The emotional systems in your brain are also participating in this morning filtering process. The amygdala, your brain's threat detection system, quickly scans your environment for anything that might represent danger or require immediate attention. When it finds nothing unusual in your familiar morning surroundings, it allows other brain systems to maintain the relaxed state that makes routine activities feel effortless and automatic. Your hippocampus, the brain region crucial for forming new memories, is also making decisions about what aspects of your morning experience deserve to be encoded for later recall. Because most elements of your morning routine are familiar and predictable, your hippocampus allocates minimal resources to encoding these experiences, saving its energy for information that might be novel or important. This coordinated neural activity creates what neuroscientists call a default mode of consciousness, a state where familiar experiences can flow through your awareness with minimal effort while your brain remains prepared to shift into more active processing if something unexpected occurs. This default mode is particularly active during routine activities like morning rituals, allowing you to perform complex sequences of actions with minimal conscious supervision. The sequence of your morning routine, whether it involves showering, brushing teeth, preparing coffee, checking messages, or any combination of familiar activities, has been encoded in your brain as what researchers call procedural memory. These action sequences become so automatic that you can perform them while thinking about something entirely different, or even while still partially asleep. Each component of your morning routine undergoes this process of becoming invisible through repetition. The feeling of warm water in the shower, which might have been a vivid sensory experience the first time you use your current bathroom, gradually fades into the background of awareness as your brain categorizes it as familiar and predictable. The taste of your morning coffee, the sequence of movements involved in getting dressed, the route from your bedroom to your kitchen, all of these experiences become increasingly automatic and less conscious as your brain optimizes their processing. But this process of making morning routines invisible isn't uniform or absolute. Your brain maintains the flexibility to bring familiar experiences back into conscious awareness when circumstances change or when you intentionally direct attention to them. If your coffee tastes different one morning, if there's an unusual sound in your house, if the quality of light seems different than usual, your brain can immediately shift these experiences from automatic processing back to conscious attention. This flexibility represents one of the most remarkable aspects of how your brain manages routine experiences. The same neural mechanisms that allow familiar experiences to fade into the background can instantly reverse this process when new information suggests that conscious attention might be needed. Your morning routine exists in a state of relaxed automation that can quickly shift to alert awareness if circumstances require it. The emotional quality of these invisible morning routines is typically one of comfort and ease. When your brain successfully automates familiar experiences, you can move through your morning activities in a state of peaceful competence, without the stress or effort that would be required if every sensation and action demanded conscious attention. This automation creates a sense of flowing naturally through familiar patterns, like following a well-worn path through a landscape you know intimately. The time perception associated with automated morning routines also differs dramatically from the experience of conscious, effortful activities. Activities that have become routine often seem to pass quickly and dreamlike, with minimal detailed memory formation. You might arrive at work with little specific recollection of your commute, or finish your morning routine without clear memories of each individual step, because your brain processes these familiar experiences automatically rather than encoding them as distinct memories. This temporal invisibility of routine serves an important psychological function, creating a sense that time spent on familiar activities is time that doesn't deplete your mental resources. When your brain automates routine experiences, these activities feel restful rather than effortful, creating psychological space for whatever challenges and opportunities the day might bring. The social dimensions of morning routines also participate in this process of becoming invisible. If you share your living space with others, their familiar presence and predictable morning behaviors gradually fade into the comfortable background of your awareness. The sound of a partner moving through their own morning routine, the familiar rhythms of household activity, the predictable patterns of interaction, all of these social elements become part of the invisible infrastructure that supports your sense of comfortable routine. Even your internal experience of thoughts and emotions during morning routines undergoes this process of becoming automatic and less conscious. The familiar sequence of thoughts that often accompanies waking up, the gradual emergence of awareness about the day ahead, the emotional transitions that mark the shift from sleep to active consciousness, all of these internal experiences can become so routine that they require minimal conscious attention. Your brain's ability to make morning routines invisible also extends to the planning and decision-making that these activities require. The sequence of choices involved in getting ready for the day, what to wear, what to eat, which tasks to prioritize, can become so automatic that you make these decisions without conscious deliberation. Your brain has developed default patterns that can guide these choices efficiently, freeing your conscious mind for more complex or novel decisions. The physical movements involved in morning routines become particularly invisible as they're encoded in your motor cortex and cerebellum as automatic action sequences. The complex coordination required to shower, dress, prepare food, and organize your space becomes so automatic that these movements can occur with minimal conscious supervision. Your hands seem to know exactly how to perform familiar tasks. Your body moves through familiar spaces with unconscious grace. Your movements flow together in sequences that feel more like dance than deliberate action. This motor automation represents one of the most sophisticated achievements of your nervous system, the ability to perform complex, coordinated actions while your conscious mind focuses on other things or simply rests in a state of peaceful awareness. The feeling of moving through familiar morning routines without conscious effort creates a sense of harmony between mind and body, where physical actions flow naturally from internal intentions without requiring detailed conscious control. The sensory adaptation that occurs during morning routines also contributes to their invisible quality. Your nervous system gradually becomes less responsive to familiar stimuli that prove to be harmless and predictable. The sound of traffic outside your window, the feeling of temperature in your living space, the quality of light during different seasons. All of these sensory experiences undergo adaptation that allows them to fade into the background of consciousness while still being processed by your nervous system. This sensory adaptation serves a protective function, preventing your consciousness from being overwhelmed by repetitive information that doesn't require active response. It allows you to exist comfortably in familiar environments while remaining alert to changes that might be significant. Your brain becomes exquisitely tuned to notice deviations from routine sensory patterns while allowing familiar patterns to flow through your awareness with minimal conscious interference. As your morning routine progresses and you prepare to engage with a larger world beyond your immediate living space, these same neural processes continue to operate, creating a foundation of invisible familiarity that supports your ability to focus on whatever new challenges and opportunities each day might bring. The comfortable automation of routine experiences creates psychological space for creativity, spontaneity, and meaningful connection with others. In our next exploration, we'll discover how the neural pathways that create these invisible morning routines continue to develop and strengthen throughout your daily experience, creating increasingly sophisticated patterns of automatic processing that extend far beyond the simple activities of beginning each day. As you move through the familiar patterns of your daily life, something remarkable is happening deep within the intricate networks of your brain. Millions of neurons are literally reshaping themselves, strengthening connections, and carving out efficient pathways that allow routine experiences to flow through your consciousness with ever-increasing ease and automaticity. This process of neural adaptation represents one of the most beautiful examples of how your brain learns not just what to pay attention to, but what can safely be ignored, creating the invisible infrastructure that supports comfortable, effortless living. The physical basis of routine invisibility lies in the fundamental plasticity of your nervous system. The brain's remarkable ability to modify its own structure and function in response to repeated experiences. Every time you perform a familiar action, think a familiar thought, or process a familiar sensation, the neural pathways involved in that experience become slightly stronger, more efficient, and more automatic. This strengthening occurs through changes at the cellular level that are so subtle you're never directly aware of them, yet they profoundly shape how you experience reality. When neuroscientists speak of neural pathways, they're describing the specific routes that electrical and chemical signals take as they travel through your brain. These pathways are formed by connections between individual neurons called synapses, which act like bridges that allow information to flow from one brain cell to another. The strength of these synaptic connections determines how easily information can travel along particular neural routes, and this strength changes constantly in response to your experiences. The process by which repeated experiences strengthen neural pathways is called long-term potentiation, and it operates according to a principle that neuroscientists summarize as neurons that fire together, wire together. When a particular pattern of neural activity occurs repeatedly, such as the sequence of brain activity involved in your morning coffee routine, the synaptic connections involved in that pattern become stronger and more efficient. This strengthening process happens gradually and automatically, without any conscious effort on your part. Each time you repeat a familiar activity, the neural pathways involved become a little more robust, a little more efficient, a little more automatic. Over weeks and months, these incremental changes accumulate into dramatic differences in how your brain processes routine experiences. The most obvious manifestation of this neural strengthening is the increasing ease with which you can perform familiar activities. Actions that once required careful attention and conscious control gradually become effortless and automatic. The complex sequence of movements involved in driving your car, the intricate coordination required to touch type on a keyboard, the sophisticated social scripts involved in familiar conversations. All of these complex behaviors become increasingly automatic as the neural pathways that support them grow stronger and more efficient. But the effects of neural pathway strengthening extend far beyond simple motor skills and familiar actions. The same process affects how your brain processes sensory information, emotional responses, thought patterns, and even your perception of time and space. As neural pathways strengthen, your brain becomes increasingly efficient at categorizing experiences as familiar or novel, important or routine, worthy of attention or safe to ignore. The development of efficient neural pathways for routine processing involves multiple brain regions working in coordination. The basal ganglia, a group of structures deep within your brain, play a particularly important role in this process. These regions are specialized for learning and automating sequences of actions, gradually taking over control of familiar behaviors from the more conscious, effortful processing systems in your prefrontal cortex. As neural pathways in the basal ganglia strengthen through repetition, routine activities require less involvement from your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for conscious decision-making and effortful control. This shift from conscious to automatic processing is what creates the subjective experience of routine activities becoming effortless and invisible. Your brain is literally rewiring itself to handle familiar experiences more efficiently. The timeline of neural pathway development varies, depending on the complexity of the experience and how frequently it's repeated. Simple motor routines might become automatic within days or weeks, while complex behavioral patterns or cognitive routines might take months or years to become fully automated. But regardless of the timeline, the underlying process is the same. Repeated activation of particular neural circuits leads to structural changes that make those circuits increasingly efficient and automatic. The strengthening of neural pathways also affects the emotional quality of routine experiences. As the brain develops efficient processing routes for familiar activities, these experiences tend to become emotionally neutral, neither particularly positive nor negative, but simply present in a comfortable, unobtrusive way. This emotional neutralization is part of what makes routine experiences fade into the background of consciousness. The spatial organization of neural pathways in your brain also plays a role in how routine processing develops. As particular neural circuits become more efficient through repetition, they tend to become more localized and specialized. This means that routine activities eventually require activation of smaller, more focused brain regions, leaving more of your neural resources available for processing novel information or engaging in creative thinking. The chemical basis of neural pathway strengthening involves complex cascades of molecular changes within brain cells. Repeated activation of neural circuits triggers the production of proteins that strengthen synaptic connections and promote the growth of new neural connections. These molecular changes occur continuously throughout your life, allowing your brain to constantly adapt to new patterns of experience while strengthening pathways for familiar activities. One of the most fascinating aspects of neural pathway development is how the brain learns to predict familiar experiences before they actually occur. As neural circuits become well established through repetition, your brain begins to activate these pathways in anticipation of routine experiences. This predictive processing is what allows you to prepare for familiar activities automatically, and what contributes to the sense that routine experiences flow effortlessly through consciousness. The development of predictive neural pathways also explains why interruptions to routine can feel particularly jarring or noticeable. When your brain has prepared neural circuits for a familiar experience that doesn't occur as expected, the mismatch between prediction and reality creates a burst of conscious attention that can bring routine activities back into awareness. This mismatch detection system helps ensure that your brain remains alert to changes in familiar patterns that might be important. The strengthening of neural pathways through repetition also affects how information flows between different brain regions. As routine processing becomes more efficient, the brain develops what neuroscientists call default networks, coordinated patterns of activity that can maintain routine functions while using minimal conscious attention. These default networks allow your brain to handle familiar experiences in the background while your conscious mind focuses on other things. The development of these default networks is particularly evident in complex activities that involve multiple brain systems working together. Learning to drive a car, for example, initially requires conscious coordination between visual processing, motor control, spatial reasoning, and decision-making systems. But as neural pathways strengthen through practice, these systems begin to work together so efficiently that driving becomes largely automatic, requiring minimal conscious supervision. The same process occurs with cognitive routines, familiar patterns of thinking, problem-solving, or decision-making that your brain encounters repeatedly. As neural pathways for these cognitive patterns strengthen, your brain can execute familiar thought processes automatically, without conscious effort. This is why experts in any field can often solve familiar problems almost instantly, while novices must work through each step consciously. The strengthening of neural pathways also affects how your brain allocates attention during routine activities. As familiar experiences become more automatic, they require less attentional resources, freeing your conscious mind to focus on other things. This attentional efficiency is what allows you to think about complex problems while performing routine tasks, or to engage in meaningful conversations while navigating familiar environments. The flexibility of neural pathway development means that your brain can adapt to new routines throughout your life while maintaining efficiency in processing established patterns. When you develop new habits or move to new environments, your brain begins the process of strengthening neural pathways for these new experiences while maintaining the automated processing of older, well-established routines. The social dimensions of neural pathway development add another layer of complexity to how routine experiences become invisible. The neural circuits involved in recognizing familiar faces, interpreting familiar social cues, and executing familiar social behaviors all undergo the same strengthening process. This is why interactions with intimate partners or close friends can feel effortless and automatic, while interactions with strangers require more conscious attention and effort. The emotional regulation systems in your brain also develop strengthened pathways for processing familiar emotional situations. As you repeatedly encounter similar emotional experiences, your brain becomes more efficient at regulating emotional responses automatically, without conscious effort. This emotional automation contributes to the sense of emotional stability and resilience that characterizes mature psychological development. The relationship between neural pathway strengthening and memory formation is particularly important for understanding how routine experiences become invisible. As experiences become more routine and automatic, they require less involvement from the hippocampus, the brain region crucial for forming detailed episodic memories. This reduced hippocampal involvement means that routine experiences are less likely to be encoded as distinct, retrievable memories, contributing to the sense that familiar activities pass by without leaving lasting impressions. The development of efficient neural pathways for routine processing represents one of your brain's most sophisticated adaptations to living in a complex, information-rich environment. By strengthening circuits for familiar experiences while maintaining flexibility for novel situations, your brain creates a cognitive architecture that balances efficiency with adaptability, automation with awareness, familiarity with discovery. The strengthening of these neural pathways occurs continuously throughout your waking hours, operating below the threshold of consciousness, but profoundly shaping how you experience reality. Every familiar sight, sound, movement, and thought contributes to this ongoing process of neural optimization, gradually creating a mental landscape where routine experiences can flow through consciousness like a gentle, unnoticed river. Understanding how neural pathways find their groove through repetition can help you appreciate the remarkable sophistication of your brain's learning systems, while also recognizing that these same pathways can be modified when you choose to bring conscious attention to familiar experiences. The plasticity that allows experiences to become automatic also allows them to be renewed and revitalized through mindful awareness. As we prepare to explore how these strengthened neural pathways affect your attention systems and create the selective awareness that characterizes conscious experience, you can rest in the knowledge that your brain is constantly working to create a foundation of invisible competence that supports both comfortable routine and ongoing growth and discovery. In our next exploration, we'll discover how the development of efficient neural pathways for routine processing creates the conditions for your attention to wander freely, allowing your conscious mind to disengage from familiar experiences and explore the vast inner landscape of thoughts, memories, and creative possibilities that define your unique mental life. As the neural pathways for routine processing become increasingly efficient and automatic, something beautiful and fascinating begins to happen to your conscious attention. It discovers the freedom to wander, to explore, to drift through the vast inner landscape of your mind while your brain continues to handle familiar experiences with seamless, unconscious competence. This wandering of attention isn't a failure of focus or a sign of distraction. It's actually one of the most sophisticated achievements of your neural architecture, representing the successful automation of routine processes that create space for the rich inner life that defines human consciousness. The liberation of attention from routine processing occurs gradually and naturally as your brain develops increasingly efficient systems for handling familiar experiences. When your neural pathways for routine activities become strong enough to operate automatically, your conscious attention no longer needs to supervise these processes moment by moment. Instead, attention becomes free to engage with the spontaneous flow of thoughts, memories, emotions, and creative insights that constitute your inner mental life. This process of attentional liberation is orchestrated by sophisticated neural networks that have evolved to balance focused attention on immediate tasks with a broader exploration of mental possibilities that characterizes human consciousness. Your brain maintains what neuroscientists call an executive attention system that can focus intensely on specific tasks when needed, while also supporting a default mode network that becomes active when external demands are minimal and routine processes are running smoothly. The default mode network represents one of the most remarkable discoveries in modern neuroscience. A coordinated system of brain regions that becomes active when your mind is not focused on specific external tasks. This network includes regions in the prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus, among others, and it supports the kind of spontaneous, self-referential thinking that characterizes mind-wandering experiences. When you're engaged in routine activities that have been thoroughly automated, walking a familiar route, performing well-practiced tasks, engaging in predictable conversations, your default mode network often becomes active, allowing your conscious attention to drift through streams of internal experience while your automated systems handle the familiar external demands. This creates the subjective experience of being able to think about complex problems while driving, or to engage in creative daydreaming while performing routine household tasks. The quality of attention during these mind-wandering episodes is quite different from the focused, directed attention required for novel or challenging tasks. Wandering attention tends to be associative, flowing from one thought or memory to another through loose connections and spontaneous associations. This kind of attention doesn't follow linear or logical patterns, but instead explores the rich network of connections that link different aspects of your knowledge, experience, and imagination. Mind-wandering attention often involves what psychologists call prospective thinking, mental exploration of future possibilities, potential scenarios, and imagined experiences. When your attention is freed from immediate routine demands, it naturally begins to explore questions like what if and what might happen, creating mental simulations of possible futures that can inform decision-making and goal-setting. This prospective thinking represents one of the most distinctly human aspects of consciousness. The temporal characteristics of wandering attention are also unique and fascinating. Unlike focused attention, which tends to be anchored in the present moment, wandering attention can move fluidly between past and future, between memory and imagination, between concrete experience and abstract possibility. This temporal flexibility allows your mind to integrate information from different time periods and to create novel connections between experiences that might be separated by years or decades. The emotional quality of mind-wandering experiences varies considerably depending on your current mood, stress level, and the content of your ongoing concerns. Sometimes wandering attention creates experiences of pleasant reverie, creative insight, or satisfying problem-solving. Other times it might involve worry, rumination, or the rehearsal of difficult emotions. But regardless of the specific content, the capacity for attention to wander freely represents a fundamental aspect of psychological well-being and creative potential. The relationship between routine automation and attentional freedom creates what might be called a cognitive division of labor in your brain. Lower-level neural systems become responsible for handling familiar, predictable experiences, while higher-level conscious systems become available for exploration, creativity, planning, and complex problem-solving. This division of labor is what allows humans to live simultaneously in two worlds: the automatic world of routine competence and the exploratory world of conscious possibility. The development of this cognitive division of labor occurs gradually throughout life as more and more experiences become automated and familiar. Children, whose neural pathways for routine processing are still developing, tend to require more conscious attention for basic activities and therefore have less attentional freedom for mind-wandering. Adults with well-developed automated systems for handling routine experiences can maintain much richer inner lives while continuing to function competently in familiar environments. The social dimensions of wandering attention add another layer of complexity to this phenomenon. When you're engaged in familiar social interactions, conversations with intimate partners, routine interactions with colleagues, predictable social rituals, your attention can often wander while still maintaining appropriate social responses. This creates the possibility for maintaining social connections while simultaneously engaging in private mental exploration. However, the balance between social engagement and mind-wandering requires careful calibration. While routine social interactions can often accommodate wandering attention, meaningful social connections typically require focused attention and present-moment awareness. Learning to modulate attention between wandering and focusing based on social context represents an important aspect of social competence and relationship maintenance. The creative potential of wandering attention is particularly significant for understanding how routine automation contributes to human innovation and problem-solving. When attention is freed from immediate task demands, it can explore novel connections between ideas, combine concepts in unexpected ways, and generate insights that might not emerge during focused, goal-directed thinking. Many creative breakthroughs occur during periods when attention is allowed to wander freely through the landscape of existing knowledge and experience. The relationship between wandering attention and memory processes is also crucial for understanding how routine automation affects consciousness. When attention wanders, it often involves the spontaneous retrieval and recombination of memories from different time periods and contexts. This memory exploration can lead to new insights about past experiences, fresh perspectives on current challenges, and novel ideas for future action. The neurochemical basis of attention wandering involves complex interactions between neurotransmitter systems that regulate arousal, focus, and reward. The default mode network that supports mind-wandering is influenced by neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which help regulate mood and motivation. The balance between focused attention and wandering attention is also influenced by neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and acetylcholine, which modulate arousal and attentional flexibility. Understanding these neurochemical influences helps explain why attention wandering varies with factors like time of day, stress level, caffeine intake, and emotional state. The same routine activities that support mind-wandering during relaxed periods might require more focused attention during times of stress or fatigue, when the neurochemical conditions for default mode activation are less favorable. The relationship between attention wandering and time perception creates some of the most interesting subjective experiences associated with routine automation. When attention wanders during routine activities, time often seems to pass quickly and smoothly, with minimal detailed memory formation. This creates the common experience of arriving at a familiar destination with little recollection of the journey, or completing routine tasks with minimal awareness of the time that has passed. This temporal invisibility of routine activities serves important psychological functions. It prevents consciousness from being cluttered with detailed memories of repetitive experiences while creating subjective time for the mental exploration that occurs during mind-wandering episodes. The time spent in internal exploration often feels more meaningful and memorable than the time spent on automated routine activities, even though both types of time serve important functions in a balanced life. The cultural and individual variations in attitudes toward attention wandering reflect different values and beliefs about the importance of present moment awareness versus mental exploration. Some contemplative traditions emphasize the cultivation of focused, present moment attention and view mind wandering as a distraction from authentic experience. Other traditions value the creative and exploratory potential of wandering attention and view it as an essential aspect of human consciousness. The optimal balance between focused attention and wandering attention likely varies between individuals and situations. Some people might naturally tend toward more focused, present moment awareness, while others might have richer and more active default mode networks that support extensive mind wandering. Neither tendency is inherently better or worse. They represent different cognitive styles that can be valuable in different contexts. The development of technology and modern lifestyle factors has created new challenges and opportunities for attention wandering. Digital devices can either support or interfere with natural mind-wandering processes, depending on how they're used. Constant connectivity and information input can prevent the quiet mental space necessary for default mode activation. While certain types of technology use might actually support contemplative states that facilitate healthy attention wandering. Learning to recognize and appreciate the value of wandering attention can help you develop a more balanced relationship with routine automation, rather than viewing mind wandering as a sign of distraction or mental laziness. You can appreciate it as evidence that your brain has successfully automated routine processes and created cognitive space for the kinds of mental exploration that contribute to creativity, problem-solving, and psychological well-being. The practice of mindfulness and contemplative awareness can help you develop greater awareness of when your attention is wandering and greater choice about when to allow wandering versus when to cultivate focused attention. This metacognitive awareness of your own attention patterns, represents a sophisticated level of mental development that can enhance both the quality of your routine experiences and the richness of your inner mental life. As routine experiences become increasingly invisible through neural automation, the liberation of attention for wandering and exploration becomes one of the most valuable gifts of mental maturity. The capacity to maintain competent functioning in familiar environments while simultaneously engaging in rich internal exploration represents one of the most distinctly human achievements of consciousness. The wandering of attention during routine activities creates opportunities for the kinds of mental integration, creative insight, and emotional processing that contribute to psychological growth and well-being. Rather than being a distraction from life, attention wandering during automated activities can become a source of meaning, creativity, and self-understanding that enriches the overall quality of conscious experience. In our next exploration, we'll discover how the automation of routine processing and the liberation of wandering attention work together with sensory adaptation to create the gentle fading of familiar stimuli from conscious awareness, allowing your nervous system to maintain alertness to novelty while resting comfortably in the predictable patterns of familiar experience. As you settle deeper into the familiar patterns of daily life, something remarkable happens to the very fabric of your sensory experience. The countless streams of information flowing through your eyes, ears, skin, nose, and tongue begin to undergo a gentle transformation, where familiar signals gradually fade from conscious awareness, while your nervous system maintains its exquisite sensitivity to anything new or unexpected. This process of sensory adaptation represents one of the most elegant and efficient systems your brain has developed for managing the overwhelming complexity of the sensory world, while preserving your ability to notice what truly matters. The sensory adaptation that creates this gentle fading occurs at multiple levels throughout your nervous system, from the specialized receptor cells in your sense organs all the way up to the complex processing networks in your cerebral cortex. This multi-layered adaptation ensures that familiar sensory experiences can fade into the background of consciousness while maintaining the neural mechanisms necessary to detect and respond to important changes in your environment. Consider what happens when you first enter a room where you'll be spending extended time. Perhaps your office, your living room, or any familiar space where you regularly spend hours of your day. Initially, your senses are alive to every detail. The quality of light filtering through windows, the particular mix of sounds that characterizes the space, the temperature and movement of air against your skin, the subtle fragrances or odors that give the environment its distinctive character, even the taste of the air as it moves through your mouth and nose. But as minutes and hours pass in this familiar environment, these sensory signals begin to undergo a process of gentle recession from conscious awareness. The sounds that initially captured your attention, the hum of ventilation systems, the distant murmur of traffic, the settling sounds of the building itself, gradually fade into what becomes an unnoticed background. This fading doesn't occur because your ears have stopped detecting these sounds, but because your auditory processing systems have learned to classify them as familiar, harmless, and non-essential for conscious attention. The same process occurs across all your sensory modalities simultaneously. The visual details of your familiar environment, the patterns of light and shadow, the arrangement of objects, the textures and colors that surround you, continue to be processed by your visual cortex, but they require less and less conscious attention as your brain categorizes them as known and predictable. Your visual system maintains its sensitivity to movement, change, and novelty while allowing familiar visual patterns to fade into the comfortable background of awareness. Your sense of touch undergoes perhaps the most dramatic adaptation to familiar stimuli. The feeling of clothing against your skin, which might be quite noticeable when you first get dressed, typically fades from awareness within minutes as your nervous system adapts to these constant, harmless sensations. The pressure of your body against the chair you're sitting in, the temperature of the air around you, the subtle tactile sensations of objects you're touching, all of these fade into sensory invisibility through the process of adaptation. Even your chemical senses, smell and taste, participate in this gentle recession of familiar signals. The distinctive odors of your living space, which visitors might notice immediately, become essentially invisible to you through repeated exposure. The taste of familiar foods requires less conscious attention as your gustatory system adapts to expected flavors. This chemical adaptation allows you to remain sensitive to novel or potentially important smells and tastes while filtering out the familiar chemical background of your daily environment. The neural mechanisms underlying this sensory adaptation operate through several complementary processes that work together to create the experience of familiar stimuli fading from awareness. At the level of sensory receptor cells, repeated exposure to the same stimulus can lead to reduced responsiveness through a process called receptor desensitization. This means that familiar stimuli literally produce weaker signals in your nervous system over time, making them less likely to capture conscious attention. But adaptation occurs not just at the level of sensory receptors, but throughout the entire sensory processing pathway. Neural circuits in your brainstem, thalamus, and cortex all contribute to the process of filtering familiar sensory information and reducing its representation in conscious awareness. These central adaptation mechanisms can be much more sophisticated than simple receptor desensitization, involving complex pattern recognition and contextual processing that allows your brain to distinguish between truly familiar stimuli and similar but potentially important variations. The temporal dynamics of sensory adaptation vary considerably depending on the type of stimulus and the sensory modality involved. Some adaptations occur within seconds or minutes, like the fading of clothing sensations or the adjustment to indoor lighting. Others develop over days, weeks, or months, like becoming accustomed to the acoustic environment of a new living space or adapting to the olfactory signature of a new environment. The reversibility of sensory adaptation is one of its most important features. While familiar stimuli can fade dramatically from conscious awareness, your nervous system maintains the capacity to bring these stimuli back into consciousness when circumstances change or when you deliberately direct attention to them. This reversibility ensures that adaptation serves as a flexible filtering mechanism rather than a permanent loss of sensitivity. The protective function of sensory adaptation becomes particularly evident when you consider how overwhelming conscious experience would become without this filtering process. If your nervous system required conscious attention for every sensory signal it detects, your awareness would be completely saturated with routine information, leaving no cognitive resources for processing novel or important stimuli. Adaptation creates the mental space necessary for focused attention, creative thinking, and meaningful interaction with your environment. The social dimensions of sensory adaptation add another layer of complexity to this process. The familiar sensory characteristics of people you interact with regularly, their voices, their physical presence, their characteristic movements, and gestures, all undergo adaptation that allows these familiar social stimuli to fade into the comfortable background of social interaction. This adaptation enables intimate relationships to feel effortless and automatic while preserving sensitivity to meaningful changes in familiar people's behavior or emotional states. The emotional implications of sensory adaptation are particularly profound for understanding how familiar environments come to feel like home. The gradual fading of initially noticeable sensory characteristics creates a sense of belonging and comfort that emerges naturally through neural adaptation. Environments feel increasingly home-like as their sensory characteristics become invisible through familiarity, creating psychological spaces where you can exist in a state of relaxed awareness. The relationship between sensory adaptation and attention creates some of the most interesting aspects of how familiar stimuli become invisible. Adaptation and attention work together in complex ways, with attention affecting the rate and degree of adaptation, while adaptation affects what captures attention. Stimuli that receive more conscious attention tend to adapt more slowly, while stimuli that are ignored adapt more rapidly and completely. This interaction between adaptation and attention creates opportunities for consciously modulating your sensory experience. By deliberately directing attention to familiar stimuli, you can temporarily reverse adaptation and bring background sensations back into conscious awareness. This capacity for attentional override of adaptation is what allows mindfulness practices to renew awareness of familiar sensory experiences that have faded into invisibility. The cultural and individual variations in sensory adaptation reflect differences in lifestyle, environment, and attentional habits. People who live in environments with consistent sensory characteristics may experience more complete adaptation to their surroundings, while those in more variable environments may maintain greater conscious awareness of sensory details. Some individuals may naturally tend toward more complete sensory adaptation, while others may maintain more conscious awareness of their sensory environment. The developmental aspects of sensory adaptation also play important roles in how familiar stimuli become invisible over the lifespan. Children, whose nervous systems are still developing, may experience different patterns of adaptation than adults. Older adults may experience changes in adaptation that reflect age-related changes in sensory processing systems. Understanding these developmental variations can help explain why sensory experiences change throughout life. The technological impacts on sensory adaptation in modern life create new patterns of familiar stimuli that undergo adaptation. The constant presence of electronic devices, artificial lighting, processed sounds, and synthetic materials creates sensory environments that may differ significantly from the natural environments in which human sensory systems evolved. Understanding how adaptation occurs in these technological environments can help optimize living and working spaces for comfort and well-being. The relationship between sensory adaptation and memory formation has important implications for how familiar experiences are encoded and recalled. Stimuli that have undergone significant adaptation are less likely to be encoded in detailed episodic memory, contributing to the sense that time spent in familiar environments passes without leaving strong memory traces. This reduced memory formation for adapted stimuli helps explain why routine experiences can seem to fade from recollection as well as from immediate awareness. The therapeutic applications of understanding sensory adaptation include approaches for managing sensory sensitivities, optimizing environments for comfort and productivity, and developing interventions for conditions where adaptation processes may be disrupted. Knowledge of adaptation can also inform practices for deliberately renewing awareness of familiar experiences when such renewal might be beneficial for well-being or appreciation. The aesthetic dimensions of sensory adaptation affect how beauty and pleasure are experienced in familiar environments. Initial aesthetic responses to environments, artworks, or sensory experiences may fade through adaptation, but they can also be renewed through changes in attention or context. Understanding adaptation can help in creating environments and experiences that maintain their aesthetic impact over time. The ecological significance of sensory adaptation reflects the evolutionary advantages of being able to filter familiar stimuli while remaining alert to novelty. In natural environments, adaptation to familiar sensory patterns would have allowed ancestors to remain alert to potential threats or opportunities while conserving mental energy for important decisions and actions. This evolutionary heritage continues to influence how adaptation operates in modern environments. The meditation and contemplative practices that work with sensory adaptation often focus on developing greater awareness of the adaptation process itself. By observing how familiar stimuli fade from awareness and learning to refresh attention to adapted experiences, contemplative practitioners can develop greater conscious choice about their sensory experience and deeper appreciation for the subtle aspects of familiar environments. The integration of sensory adaptation with other neural processes that make routine invisible creates a coordinated system that allows conscious awareness to exist comfortably in familiar environments while remaining available for novel experiences and creative exploration. This integration represents one of the most sophisticated achievements of neural evolution, creating the conditions for complex consciousness to flourish in a world filled with repetitive sensory information. As familiar sensory signals continue their gentle fade into the background of consciousness, they create the foundation for the kind of comfortable, effortless existence in familiar environments that characterizes much of daily life. This sensory invisibility isn't a loss or limitation, but rather a sophisticated adaptation that creates space for the higher-order mental processes that define human consciousness. The fade of sensory signals through adaptation represents your nervous system's elegant solution to the challenge of living consciously in a world filled with repetitive information. By allowing familiar stimuli to recede from awareness while maintaining sensitivity to change and novelty, sensory adaptation creates the cognitive freedom necessary for creativity, reflection, meaningful relationships, and the rich inner life that emerges when consciousness isn't overwhelmed by routine sensory input. In our next exploration, we'll discover how this gentle fading of sensory signals works together with memory processes to create the phenomenon where routine experiences not only fade from immediate awareness, but also seem to disappear from recollection, as if they had never fully existed in the first place. As routine experiences fade from immediate awareness through the elegant processes of neural adaptation and sensory habituation, something equally remarkable happens to how these experiences are encoded, stored, and retrieved from memory. They undergo a process of gentle erasure that's so subtle and gradual you rarely notice it occurring, yet so profound that it can make entire days, weeks, or even months of routine living seem to disappear from recollection, as if time itself had somehow passed without leaving lasting traces in the landscape of memory. This phenomenon of memory's gentle erasure isn't a malfunction or failure of your memory systems, but rather represents one of the most sophisticated and beneficial adaptations of human consciousness. Your brain has evolved exquisitely selective memory mechanisms that prioritize the encoding and storage of novel, meaningful, or emotionally significant experiences while allowing routine, predictable experiences to pass through consciousness with minimal permanent trace. This selective memory formation is what creates the subjective experience that routine time seems to disappear from your life story. The process begins with how your brain decides what experiences deserve to be encoded into long-term memory in the first place. The hippocampus, a seahorse-shaped structure deep within your temporal lobe, acts as the primary gatekeeper for memory formation, constantly evaluating incoming experiences to determine which ones warrant the metabolic investment required for long-term storage. This evaluation process is heavily influenced by factors like novelty, emotional significance, personal relevance, and the degree of conscious attention an experience receives. Routine experiences, by their very nature, score low on most of these factors that promote strong memory formation. They're familiar rather than novel, emotionally neutral rather than significant, predictable rather than surprising, and they receive minimal conscious attention due to the automation processes we've been exploring. As a result, routine experiences are often processed by the hippocampus in what neuroscientists call a minimal encoding mode, where only the most basic features of the experience are stored, if anything is stored at all. This minimal encoding of routine experiences serves several important functions. First, it prevents your memory systems from becoming cluttered with redundant information that would serve no useful purpose in guiding future behavior or understanding. If your brain stored detailed memories of every routine commute, every ordinary meal, every predictable conversation, your memory systems would quickly become overwhelmed with trivial information that would interfere with your ability to access truly important memories. Second, the minimal encoding of routine experiences conserves the considerable metabolic energy required for memory formation and maintenance. Creating and maintaining memories requires significant resources from your brain, which already consumes about 20% of your body's total energy despite representing only 2% of your body weight. By selectively encoding only meaningful experiences, your brain can allocate its limited resources more efficiently. The temporal characteristics of memory formation for routine experiences create some of the most interesting aspects of how familiar activities seem to disappear from recollection. Your brain tends to encode routine experiences in what psychologists call generic rather than episodic format. Instead of storing specific details about particular instances of routine activities, your memory systems create generalized representations that capture the typical features of these experiences without preserving information about specific occurrences. This shift from episodic to generic memory formation is what creates the common experience of being unable to recall specific details about routine activities, even those that occurred recently. You might struggle to remember exactly what you had for lunch yesterday, what route you took to work last Tuesday, or what you were thinking about during routine activities from the past week. These experiences weren't necessarily forgotten in the conventional sense. They may simply never have been encoded in sufficient detail to support specific recollection. The emotional neutrality that characterizes most routine experiences also contributes to their weak memory formation. The amygdala, which plays a crucial role in emotional processing, normally enhances memory formation for emotionally significant experiences by releasing stress hormones that strengthen the memory consolidation process. But routine experiences, which typically evoke minimal emotional response, don't benefit from this emotional enhancement, making them much less likely to form strong, lasting memories. The attention patterns associated with routine activities further contribute to weak memory formation. As we've explored in previous chapters, routine experiences often occur while attention is wandering or focused on internal mental activity rather than external details. The hippocampus relies heavily on focused attention for effective memory encoding, so experiences that occur outside the focus of attention are much less likely to be encoded in retrievable form. This relationship between attention and memory formation creates interesting variations in how routine experiences are remembered based on your mental state and focus during these activities. Routine activities that occur while you're actively thinking about something else may leave virtually no memory trace, while the same activities performed with greater conscious attention may be encoded more completely. This variability helps explain why sometimes routine experiences can be recalled clearly, while other times they seem to have vanished completely. The social dimensions of memory formation during routine activities add another layer of complexity to how familiar experiences are encoded and recalled. Routine interactions with familiar people, family members, close friends, regular colleagues, often involve such well-established social scripts and predictable patterns that these interactions receive minimal encoding by memory systems. This can create the strange experience of spending significant time with intimate others while forming few specific memories of these interactions. However, this minimal encoding of routine social interactions serves important psychological functions. It allows intimate relationships to feel comfortable and effortless rather than requiring constant conscious attention and memory formation. The lack of detailed memory formation for routine social interactions can actually enhance relationship satisfaction by preventing the accumulation of trivial negative details that might otherwise interfere with overall positive feelings about close relationships. The memory consolidation process that occurs during sleep also affects how routine experiences are processed and potentially erased from long-term storage. During sleep, your brain engages in sophisticated memory processing that strengthens important memories while allowing less significant memories to fade. Routine experiences, which are typically encoded weakly in the first place, are often among the first to be pruned during sleep-based memory consolidation. This sleep-based memory processing serves a kind of editing function that helps maintain the overall quality and relevance of your long-term memory storage. Just as a writer might remove unnecessary details from a story to improve its clarity and impact, your sleeping brain removes routine experiences that don't contribute meaningfully to your life narrative or future decision-making capabilities. The reconstructive nature of memory retrieval also plays a role in how routine experiences seem to disappear from recollection. When you try to remember routine activities, your brain often reconstructs these memories based on general knowledge about what typically happens during such activities rather than retrieving specific episodic details. This reconstruction process can make it difficult to distinguish between what you actually remember about specific instances and what you're inferring based on general patterns. The cultural and linguistic factors that influence memory formation also affect how routine experiences are encoded and recalled. Cultures that place greater emphasis on mindfulness and present moment awareness may promote stronger encoding of routine experiences, while cultures that emphasize efficiency and goal achievement may encourage the kind of automated processing that leads to minimal memory formation for routine activities. Individual differences in memory formation for routine experiences reflect variations in personality, cognitive style, and life circumstances. Some people naturally tend to notice and remember more details about routine experiences, while others are more inclined toward the kind of automated processing that results in minimal memory formation. Neither tendency is inherently better or worse. They represent different cognitive strategies that can be adaptive in different contexts. The relationship between memory formation and identity construction is particularly relevant for understanding how routine experiences affect your sense of self and life story. The experiences that are strongly encoded in memory tend to become the building blocks of your personal narrative and sense of identity, while experiences that are minimally encoded have little impact on your self-concept. This means that routine experiences, despite occupying large portions of your actual lifetime, may contribute relatively little to your sense of who you are and what your life has been about. This disconnect between lived time and remembered time can create interesting philosophical questions about the nature of experience and the construction of meaning. If routine experiences fade from memory so completely that they seem never to have occurred, in what sense can they be said to have been truly experienced? Yet these same routine experiences may contribute significantly to your well-being, skill development, and relationship maintenance, even if they don't leave lasting memory traces. The practical implications of understanding memory's gentle erasure include recognizing that the apparent emptiness of routine time doesn't necessarily indicate that this time was wasted or meaningless. Routine experiences may serve important functions in your life, even if they don't contribute significantly to your explicit memory or life narrative. Learning to appreciate the value of routine experiences that don't form strong memories can lead to a more balanced understanding of how time and experience contribute to well-being. The meditation and mindfulness practices that focus on present moment awareness can provide tools for selectively enhancing memory formation for routine experiences when such enhancement might be beneficial. By bringing conscious attention to routine activities, you can override the default minimal encoding processes and create stronger memories of experiences that might otherwise fade into oblivion. The therapeutic applications of understanding memory formation during routine experiences include interventions for conditions where memory formation may be disrupted, strategies for enhancing life satisfaction through improved encoding of positive routine experiences, and approaches for managing conditions like depression where negative routine experiences may be over-encoded while positive experiences are under-encoded. The technological impacts on memory formation in modern life create new patterns of routine experience that may be encoded differently than traditional routine activities. The constant presence of digital devices, social media, and information streams may interfere with the natural processes of minimal encoding for routine experiences, potentially creating new forms of memory clutter that didn't exist in earlier historical periods. The aging-related changes in memory formation for routine experiences reflect the complex ways that memory systems change throughout the lifespan. While some aspects of memory formation may decline with age, other aspects may become more selective and efficient, potentially leading to different patterns of routine experience encoding in older adults compared to younger individuals. The connection between memory formation and creativity reveals how the gentle erasure of routine experiences may actually serve creative and innovative thinking. By preventing memory systems from becoming cluttered with routine details, this selective encoding creates mental space for the novel connections and insights that characterize creative thinking. The forgetting of routine experiences may be as important for creativity as the remembering of significant ones. The relationship between memory formation and emotional well-being shows how the gentle erasure of routine experiences can contribute to psychological health. If every minor frustration, ordinary disappointment, or routine stress were permanently encoded in memory, the accumulated weight of these negative experiences could significantly impact mood and outlook. The selective forgetting of emotionally neutral or mildly negative routine experiences helps maintain psychological equilibrium. As routine experiences continue their gentle disappearance from the landscape of memory, they create space for the meaningful experiences that do receive strong encoding to have greater impact on your sense of self and life story. This selective memory formation represents one of your brain's most sophisticated strategies for creating a coherent, meaningful narrative from the complex stream of daily experience. The gentle erasure of routine memories isn't a loss, but rather a gift. A sophisticated neural process that curates your stored experiences to emphasize what truly matters while allowing the comfortable background of daily life to flow through consciousness without creating permanent traces that might interfere with your ability to access and appreciate life's more significant moments. In our next exploration, we'll discover how these memory processes work together with the development of automatic behavioral patterns to create what neuroscientists call autopilot consciousness, a state where complex sequences of actions can unfold with minimal conscious supervision, creating the subjective experience of time passing in a dreamlike flow of unconscious competence. As the various neural processes we've been exploring, the strengthening of routine pathways, the liberation of wandering attention, the fading of sensory signals, and the gentle erasure of routine memories, all work together in harmonious coordination. They create one of the most remarkable states of human consciousness, the activation of what researchers call autopilot mode. This isn't the dramatic autopilot of science fiction, but rather a subtle, sophisticated state where your brain coordinates complex sequences of actions and responses with minimal conscious oversight, allowing you to navigate familiar territories of experience with the grace and efficiency of a master craftsperson whose hands seem to know their work without conscious direction. The activation of autopilot consciousness represents the culmination of your brain's remarkable capacity for learning and automation. Through countless repetitions of familiar activities, your nervous system has developed such robust and efficient processing pathways that entire sequences of complex behaviors can unfold automatically, requiring only the lightest touch of conscious awareness to initiate and monitor their progress. This state of automated competence creates the possibility for consciousness to exist simultaneously on multiple levels, engage with automatic behaviors at one level while free to explore other realms of thought and experience at another. The neural architecture that supports autopilot consciousness involves a sophisticated network of brain regions that have learned to work together with remarkable coordination and efficiency. The basal ganglia, deep structures that are crucial for learning and automating action sequences, take primary responsibility for coordinating familiar behavioral patterns. The cerebellum, your brain's movement coordination center, contributes its exquisite timing and precision to ensure that automated actions flow smoothly and accurately. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex maintains a kind of supervisory awareness, ready to resume conscious control if anything unexpected occurs. The transition into autopilot mode often happens so gradually and naturally that you're rarely aware of when it begins. You might start a familiar activity with full conscious attention, beginning to drive a well-known route, starting to prepare a meal you've made many times before, or engaging in any complex but familiar task. But as the activity progresses and your brain recognizes the familiar patterns involved, conscious control gradually and seamlessly transfers to automated systems, freeing your awareness for other pursuits while the familiar behaviors continue to unfold with unconscious precision. This transfer of control from conscious to automatic systems creates one of the most distinctive features of autopilot consciousness: the sense that actions are happening through you rather than being directed by you. Your hands seem to know exactly how to perform familiar tasks without conscious instruction. Your body moves through familiar spaces with unconscious grace. Your responses to familiar situations emerge naturally and appropriately without deliberate planning or effort. This state of unconscious competence can feel almost magical, as if your accumulated experience has somehow become embodied wisdom that operates independently of conscious thought. The temporal characteristics of autopilot consciousness create some of its most interesting subjective features. Time during autopilot episodes often seems to pass differently than during conscious, effortful activities. Familiar tasks that are performed on autopilot may seem to complete themselves quickly and smoothly, while the same tasks performed with conscious attention might feel more effortful and time-consuming. This temporal compression during autopilot activity contributes to the sense that routine experiences pass by in a dreamlike flow. The relationship between autopilot consciousness and memory formation creates additional layers of temporal invisibility. Since autopilot activities typically receive minimal conscious attention and generate weak memory encoding, they often leave little trace in your explicit recollection. This can create the striking experience of arriving at a destination with minimal memory of the journey, or completing complex tasks with little recollection of the specific steps involved. The combination of temporal compression during the activity and weak memory formation afterward can make autopilot experiences seem almost ethereal, as if they occurred in a parallel dimension of consciousness. The emotional quality of autopilot consciousness is typically one of calm competence and effortless flow. When your brain successfully automates familiar activities, these experiences feel peaceful rather than stressful, flowing rather than effortful, natural rather than forced. This emotional ease contributes to the psychological benefits of well-developed autopilot capabilities, creating zones of comfortable competence in your daily life, where you can exist in a state of relaxed effectiveness. The scope of activities that can operate on autopilot is remarkably broad, extending far beyond simple motor skills to include complex cognitive and social behaviors. Driving familiar routes, preparing familiar meals, engaging in routine conversations, performing well-practiced professional tasks, navigating familiar social situations, and even complex creative activities that have become second nature can all operate with varying degrees of autopilot consciousness. The development of autopilot capabilities in diverse areas of life creates an increasingly rich foundation of unconscious competence that supports conscious exploration and creativity. The social dimensions of autopilot consciousness are particularly fascinating, as they reveal how interpersonal interactions can become automated while still maintaining their essential social functions. Conversations with intimate partners, routine interactions with colleagues, familiar social rituals and ceremonies. All of these can operate partially or largely on autopilot, while still fulfilling their social and emotional purposes. This social autopilot allows relationships to feel comfortable and effortless, while preserving conscious attention for deeper levels of connection and communication when they're needed. The flexibility of autopilot systems represents one of their most sophisticated features. While autopilot consciousness can handle familiar situations with minimal conscious oversight, these systems remain continuously responsive to unexpected changes or novel demands. If something unusual occurs during an autopilot activity, an unexpected obstacle while driving, an unusual ingredient while cooking, an unexpected response during a routine conversation, conscious attention can immediately resume control with remarkable speed and efficiency. This flexibility ensures that autopilot consciousness provides efficiency without sacrificing adaptability. The learning and adaptation that continue to occur during autopilot consciousness demonstrate that these automated systems are not static or rigid, but continue to evolve and improve through experience. Even when activities are performed largely automatically, subtle learning continues to occur that can enhance the efficiency, accuracy, and appropriateness of automated responses. This ongoing learning during autopilot activity helps explain how expertise continues to develop even in highly automated domains. The individual variations in autopilot consciousness reflect differences in personality, cognitive style, learning history, and current life circumstances. Some people may develop extensive autopilot capabilities that allow them to automate large portions of their daily activities, while others may tend toward maintaining more conscious control over familiar behaviors. Some individuals may be more comfortable with autopilot consciousness, while others may prefer the sense of active engagement that comes with conscious control. Neither approach is inherently superior. They represent different strategies for navigating the balance between efficiency and awareness. The cultural factors that influence autopilot consciousness include societal attitudes toward consciousness, attention, and the value of present moment awareness. Some cultures emphasize the importance of mindful, conscious engagement with all activities, which might discourage extensive reliance on autopilot consciousness. Other cultures may value efficiency and goal achievement in ways that encourage the development of robust autopilot capabilities. Understanding these cultural influences can help individuals make conscious choices about when to cultivate autopilot consciousness and when to maintain more conscious engagement. The relationship between autopilot consciousness and creativity reveals interesting paradoxes about the nature of unconscious competence. While autopilot consciousness involves automated, habitual responses that might seem to discourage creativity, the liberation of conscious attention during autopilot activities often creates optimal conditions for creative insights and innovative thinking. Many creative breakthroughs occur during routine activities that are operating on autopilot, suggesting that unconscious competence in familiar domains can actually facilitate conscious creativity in other areas. The developmental aspects of autopilot consciousness show how these capabilities emerge and evolve throughout the lifespan. Children, whose neural pathways for routine processing are still developing, typically have limited autopilot capabilities and require more conscious attention for activities that adults can perform automatically. As neural systems mature and experience accumulates, autopilot capabilities gradually expand, creating increasingly sophisticated foundations of unconscious competence. In later life, well-developed autopilot systems can help maintain functional independence even when some conscious cognitive abilities may be declining. The technological implications of understanding autopilot consciousness include both opportunities and challenges for human-technology interaction. Technologies that support natural autopilot capabilities can enhance human efficiency and reduce cognitive load, while technologies that interfere with autopilot consciousness may create unnecessary stress and effort. Understanding how autopilot consciousness operates can inform the design of tools, environments, and systems that work harmoniously with natural human information processing. The safety considerations related to autopilot consciousness are particularly important in activities where errors could have serious consequences. While autopilot consciousness generally operates with remarkable reliability and accuracy, there are situations where conscious oversight remains essential for safety. Learning to recognize when autopilot consciousness is appropriate and when conscious attention is required represents an important aspect of developing mature judgment and risk assessment capabilities. The meditation and contemplative practices that work with autopilot consciousness often focus on developing greater awareness of when these automatic systems are operating and greater choice about when to engage conscious attention. Rather than viewing autopilot consciousness as unconscious or undesirable, contemplative approaches often recognize it as a natural and beneficial aspect of mental functioning that can be appreciated and worked with skillfully. The therapeutic applications of understanding autopilot consciousness include interventions for conditions where automatic processing may be disrupted, strategies for developing healthy routines and habits, and approaches for managing anxiety or perfectionism that might interfere with the natural development of unconscious competence. Understanding autopilot consciousness can also inform treatments for conditions like depression, where the loss of automatic positive behaviors may contribute to psychological difficulties. The philosophical implications of autopilot consciousness raise fascinating questions about the nature of agency, intention, and conscious will. When complex, purposeful actions occur largely outside of conscious awareness, what does this suggest about the relationship between consciousness and behavior? How do we understand personal responsibility and intentionality in the context of automated action? These questions don't have simple answers, but exploring them can deepen understanding of the nature of mind and consciousness. The integration of autopilot consciousness with other mental processes creates a complex, multi-layered model of human cognition where conscious and unconscious systems work together in sophisticated harmony. Autopilot consciousness doesn't replace conscious awareness, but rather creates a foundation of automated competence that supports and enhances conscious functioning. This integration allows humans to exist simultaneously as unconsciously competent actors and consciously creative agents. The quality of life implications of well-developed autopilot consciousness are generally positive, creating zones of effortless competence that reduce stress, conserve mental energy, and create psychological space for meaningful engagement with novel challenges and opportunities. The ability to perform many of life's necessary activities on autopilot frees consciousness for the kinds of experiences that contribute most directly to meaning, growth, and satisfaction. As autopilot consciousness continues to operate quietly in the background of daily life, coordinating familiar activities with unconscious precision, it creates one of the most remarkable achievements of neural development: the capacity to live competently and effectively while maintaining conscious awareness available for whatever truly matters in each moment. This quiet activation of automated systems represents not a limitation of consciousness, but rather its liberation from routine demands, creating space for the deeper engagements that make life meaningful and fulfilling. The gentle efficiency of autopilot consciousness demonstrates how the brain's capacity for automation serves not to diminish human experience, but to enhance it, creating foundations of unconscious competence that support conscious exploration, creative expression, and meaningful connection with others and with the world. In our next exploration, we'll discover how the operation of autopilot consciousness creates distinctive effects on time perception, where familiar activities seem to compress temporal experience and create the subjective sense that routine periods pass by in an accelerated, dreamlike flow that contrasts sharply with the expanded, detailed time experience that characterizes novel or challenging activities. As autopilot consciousness becomes increasingly sophisticated and routine experiences fade into the gentle automation we've been exploring, something remarkable happens to your experience of time itself. The present moment, which normally feels substantial and enduring during novel or challenging activities, begins to compress and contract during familiar experiences, creating the subjective sensation that routine time passes more quickly, more smoothly, and with less detailed texture than the rich, expanded time that characterizes periods of conscious engagement and active attention. This compression of subjective time during routine activities represents one of the most fascinating effects of how your brain makes familiar experiences invisible. While clock time continues to advance at its steady, mechanical pace, your internal experience of time becomes remarkably elastic, stretching during moments of intense focus or novel experience, and compressing during periods of routine automation. This temporal elasticity creates the common experience of wondering where the time went after completing familiar activities, or feeling surprised by how much clock time has passed during periods that felt brief and insubstantial. The neural mechanisms underlying this temporal compression involve the complex interactions between attention, memory formation, and consciousness that we've been exploring throughout our journey. Your brain's perception of time depends heavily on how much conscious attention is devoted to moment-to-moment experience and how much detailed information is being encoded into memory. When routine activities operate on autopilot with minimal conscious attention and weak memory formation, they create the subjective experience of time passing quickly and smoothly, like a river flowing through a landscape without leaving detailed impressions of the journey. The relationship between attention and time perception is particularly crucial for understanding how routine experiences compress temporal awareness. When your attention is fully engaged with present moment experience, as happens during novel, challenging, or emotionally significant activities, time seems to expand, creating rich, detailed temporal texture where moments feel substantial and enduring. But when attention wanders or focuses internally while routine activities proceed automatically, the present moment loses much of its subjective substance, creating the sense that time is passing without your full participation. This attentional modulation of time perception explains why the same clock time can feel dramatically different depending on your mental state and the type of activity you're engaged in. Waiting for something important while paying close attention to the passage of time can make minutes feel like hours, while engaging in absorbing activities where attention is fully occupied can make hours feel like minutes. Routine activities that operate on autopilot fall into an intermediate category where time seems to pass smoothly and unobtrusively, neither dragging nor flying, but simply flowing past with minimal conscious registration. The memory formation patterns associated with routine activities create additional layers of temporal compression that extend beyond the immediate experience of time during these activities. Since routine experiences typically generate weak memory traces, they contribute little to your retrospective sense of how much time has passed or how much experience you've accumulated. When you look back on periods dominated by routine activities, these periods may seem to have passed quickly not just during their occurrence, but also in retrospection, as if they had occupied less real time than the clock would suggest. This retrospective compression of routine time can create the striking experience of feeling that large portions of your life have somehow disappeared or passed without leaving substantial traces. Weeks, months, or even years that were largely occupied by routine activities may seem in memory to have passed quickly and without much happening. Even though these periods may have included important maintenance of relationships, skill development, or other valuable but incremental changes that don't register strongly in explicit memory. The emotional quality of compressed routine time is typically one of peaceful flow rather than anxiety or loss. When time compression occurs during positive or neutral routine activities, it often feels pleasant and restful, like being carried along by a gentle current that requires no effort or resistance. This pleasant quality of compressed routine time contributes to the psychological benefits of well-developed habits and automated behaviors, creating temporal spaces where you can exist without the effort or stress that characterizes more demanding activities. The contrast between compressed routine time and expanded novel time creates one of the most distinctive features of mature temporal experience. As you develop increasingly sophisticated autopilot capabilities for familiar activities, your subjective time experience becomes more polarized between the smooth, fast flow of routine periods and the rich, detailed expansion of novel or challenging experiences. This polarization can enhance the subjective impact of meaningful experiences by creating greater contrast between routine and significant moments. The seasonal and cyclical patterns in time perception often reflect the varying ratios of routine to novel experience in different periods of life. Periods dominated by familiar activities and well-established routines may be characterized by compressed, fast-flowing time experience, while periods of transition, travel, learning, or significant life changes may be characterized by expanded, detailed time experience. Understanding these patterns can help explain why some life periods seem to pass quickly, while others feel rich and substantial in memory. The social dimensions of temporal compression add another layer of complexity to how routine experiences affect time perception. Familiar social interactions that operate largely on autopilot, routine conversations with intimate partners, predictable interactions with colleagues, familiar social rituals, often contribute to compressed time experience, where social time seems to pass smoothly and quickly. This social temporal compression can enhance relationship comfort by creating shared experiences of flowing, effortless interaction. However, the compression of social time also creates challenges for maintaining deep connection and meaningful interaction within familiar relationships. If too much social time becomes compressed through automation, relationships may begin to feel empty or superficial despite being comfortable and effortless. Learning to balance the efficiency of social autopilot with periods of conscious, present-moment engagement represents an important aspect of maintaining meaningful relationships over time. The developmental aspects of temporal compression show how time perception changes throughout the lifespan as routine capabilities develop and expand. Children with limited autopilot capabilities and frequent novel experiences often experience time as generally expanded and detailed. Young adults, developing new routines while still encountering many novel experiences, may experience mixed time perception with both compressed and expanded periods. Older adults, with extensive autopilot capabilities but potentially fewer novel experiences, may experience increasingly compressed time unless they actively seek new experiences or cultivate present-moment awareness. The relationship between temporal compression and life satisfaction reveals complex interactions between efficiency, meaning, and subjective well-being. While compressed routine time can create psychological space for meaningful activities and reduce the stress associated with life's necessary tasks, excessive temporal compression can create the sense that life is passing by without sufficient engagement or meaning. Finding optimal balances between routine automation and conscious engagement represents an important aspect of creating satisfying life experiences. The cultural variations and attitudes toward temporal compression reflect different values regarding efficiency, mindfulness, and the proper relationship between consciousness and time. Some cultures emphasize the importance of present-moment awareness and may discourage the kind of temporal compression that results from extensive routine automation. Other cultures may value efficiency and goal achievement in ways that encourage temporal compression as a means of creating more time for meaningful activities. The technological impacts on temporal compression in modern life create new patterns of time experience that may differ significantly from traditional human temporal rhythms. Digital devices and information technologies can create both extreme temporal compression through multitasking and information overload, and artificial temporal expansion through continuous partial attention that prevents the development of smooth autopilot flow. Understanding these technological effects can help in making conscious choices about how to structure temporal experience in modern environments. The meditation and contemplative practices that work with temporal compression often focus on developing greater awareness of time perception and greater choice about when to allow compressed time experience versus when to cultivate expanded, present moment awareness. These practices recognize that both compressed and expanded time experience have value, and that conscious choice about temporal experience can enhance both efficiency and meaning in daily life. The therapeutic applications of understanding temporal compression include interventions for conditions where time perception may be disrupted, strategies for managing anxiety or depression that may be related to temporal experience, and approaches for enhancing life satisfaction through optimal balancing of routine automation and conscious engagement. Understanding temporal compression can also inform treatments for conditions like ADHD, where temporal perception difficulties may interfere with effective functioning. The creative implications of temporal compression reveal how routine automation can both support and potentially inhibit creative expression. The psychological space created by compressed routine time can provide opportunities for creative exploration, while the temporal compression itself may reduce the rich, detailed experience that often stimulates creative insight. Learning to modulate temporal experience based on creative goals can enhance both productivity and artistic expression. The philosophical implications of temporal compression raise profound questions about the nature of time, consciousness, and meaningful existence. If routine experiences compress time perception and leave minimal memory traces, in what sense can they be said to constitute real-life experience? How do we understand the relationship between clock time and lived time, between efficiency and meaning, between automatic competence and conscious engagement? These questions don't have simple answers, but exploring them can deepen understanding of how to live consciously in a world that offers both routine automation and conscious choice. The relationship between temporal compression and aging reveals how time perception changes as life experience accumulates and routine capabilities expand. The common experience that time seems to pass more quickly as we age may reflect increasing automation of life activities and decreasing frequency of novel experiences. Understanding this relationship can inform choices about how to structure later life to maintain rich temporal experience while benefiting from accumulated competence. The integration of temporal compression with other aspects of routine invisibility creates a comprehensive understanding of how familiar experiences fade from consciousness across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The same neural processes that make routine experiences less noticeable, less memorable, and more automatic also compress their temporal experience, creating a coordinated system that allows routine life to flow smoothly while preserving conscious resources for meaningful engagement. The quality of life implications of temporal compression are generally positive when it occurs within a balanced life structure that includes both routine automation and conscious engagement. Compressed routine time creates efficiency and psychological space, while expanded conscious time provides meaning and satisfaction. Problems arise when this balance becomes skewed too far in either direction, either toward excessive routine compression that empties life of meaning or toward excessive conscious effort that creates stress and exhaustion. The seasonal rhythms of temporal compression often reflect natural cycles of activity and rest, engagement and automation, novelty and routine. Learning to work with these natural rhythms rather than against them can enhance both the efficiency benefits of temporal compression and the satisfaction benefits of expanded conscious experience. This rhythmic approach to temporal experience acknowledges that different types of time serve different functions in a complete human life. As routine experiences continue to compress temporal awareness and create the sense of time flowing smoothly past without demanding conscious attention. They provide one of the essential foundations for conscious life: the ability to exist efficiently in familiar environments while maintaining temporal resources for the experiences that truly require conscious engagement and active participation. The shrinking present moment during routine activities represents not a loss of time, but rather its transformation into a different kind of temporal experience that serves the essential function of creating psychological space for the kinds of conscious engagement that contribute most directly to meaning, growth, and satisfaction in human life. In our next exploration, we'll discover how all these processes of making routine invisible can be gently reversed through the cultivation of mindful awareness, allowing familiar experiences to be renewed and revitalized while maintaining the efficiency benefits of automation when such efficiency serves your deeper purposes and values. As we near the end of our gentle journey through the invisible workings of your mind, we arrive at one of the most beautiful discoveries about human consciousness: that all the processes we've explored, all the elegant neural mechanisms that make routine experiences fade into comfortable invisibility, can be gently reversed and renewed through the cultivation of mindful awareness. This isn't about fighting against your brain's natural tendency toward automation, but rather about learning to work skillfully with these processes, appreciating their efficiency, while also maintaining the capacity to bring fresh attention to familiar experiences when such renewal serves your well-being and sense of meaning. The practice of finding wonder in the familiar begins with understanding that the invisibility of routine experiences isn't permanent or absolute, but rather represents a default mode of processing that can be consciously modulated through attention and intention. The same neural flexibility that allows experiences to become automatic also allows them to be brought back into conscious awareness, renewed and revitalized through the simple but profound act of paying attention to what has become familiar. When you deliberately bring conscious attention to routine experiences that have faded into automation, something remarkable happens in your nervous system. The sensory adaptation that has made familiar stimuli invisible can be temporarily reversed, allowing colors to seem more vivid, sounds to become more distinct, textures to feel more present. The neural pathways that have automated familiar actions can be supplemented by conscious awareness, creating the experience of performing familiar tasks with fresh appreciation for their complexity and elegance. This renewal of awareness doesn't require eliminating the automation that makes life efficient and comfortable. Instead, it involves developing what contemplative traditions call choiceless awareness, the capacity to notice when automation is occurring and to choose moments for bringing conscious attention back to familiar experiences. This skillful balance allows you to benefit from automation while also maintaining access to the richness and meaning that conscious engagement can bring to any experience. The practice of mindful attention to routine activities often reveals layers of complexity and beauty that have been hidden by familiarity. The simple act of eating a meal mindfully can transform a routine experience into an exploration of taste, texture, aroma, and the complex coordination required for nourishment. Walking a familiar route with conscious attention can reveal details of light, sound, and movement that have been filtered out by sensory adaptation. Even routine conversations can be renewed through mindful listening that brings fresh attention to familiar voices and patterns of interaction. The time perception effects of bringing mindful attention to routine experiences can be particularly striking. Activities that normally compress time through automation can expand into rich, detailed temporal experience when approached with conscious awareness. A routine morning coffee, approached mindfully, can become a substantial period of sensory engagement and present moment awareness rather than an unconscious transition between sleep and activity. As our exploration of how your brain makes routine invisible draws to its peaceful conclusion, we arrive at a place of gentle understanding about the remarkable sophistication of your mental processes and the beautiful balance they create between efficiency and awareness, between automation and consciousness, between the comfort of familiar patterns and the possibility of renewed engagement with the world around you. Throughout our journey together, we've discovered that the invisibility of routine isn't a limitation or flaw in human consciousness, but rather represents one of the most elegant adaptations of your nervous system. The ability to automate familiar experiences creates the foundation for a conscious life that can balance competent functioning in familiar environments with the cognitive freedom necessary for creativity, growth, and meaningful connection with others. The gentle processes we've explored, the strengthening of neural pathways, the liberation of wandering attention, the fading of sensory signals, the gentle erasure of routine memories, the activation of autopilot consciousness, and the compression of temporal experience, all work together to create a sophisticated cognitive architecture that allows you to live both efficiently and meaningfully in a complex world. As you prepare to drift into sleep, you can rest in the knowledge that your brain continues its invisible work of processing familiar experiences with elegant automation, freeing your consciousness for dreams, rest, and the renewal that prepares you for tomorrow's opportunities for both routine competence and conscious engagement. The routine experiences that fade into invisibility aren't lost or wasted, but rather serve as the stable foundation that supports the conscious experiences that bring meaning and satisfaction to life. The automation of familiar activities creates psychological space for love, creativity, learning, and growth. The experiences that define what it means to live consciously in an ever-changing world. Sleep peacefully, knowing that your mind's invisible processes continue their gentle work of creating comfort and familiarity while preserving the capacity for wonder, discovery, and conscious choice in each new moment. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful exploration of your brain's hidden wisdom. If these gentle journeys into the workings of consciousness have brought you insight or comfort, I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to Whispering Atom and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Where in the world are you drifting towards sleep tonight? And what aspects of your mind's invisible work spoke most peacefully to your awareness? Until our next gentle exploration together, may your dreams be as elegant and sophisticated as the neural processes that create the invisible foundation for conscious life, and as peaceful as the automation that allows familiarity to become a source of comfort rather than a burden on awareness.